The sunlight streamed through the thin curtains of the guest bedroom, though the word guest had long since lost its meaning. I've lived here for 2 years now, but I still feel like a temporary guest, an unwelcome guest. Every morning begins with this unpleasant realization. I, Virginia Cassidy, 73 years old, former top pharmacologist, widow, mother, and grandmother, have become a domestic servant in my own daughter's house. The room is small, with minimal furniture, a single bed, a nightstand, a dresser, and a tiny trundle. All that remained of my former life were a few framed photographs, the pharmacology books I couldn't throw away, and the wedding ring I still wore. I stood up, threw on a robe, and walked over to the mirror. The wrinkles on my face had gotten deeper over the 2 years. Humphrey used to say each one was the story of our lives. Would he smile now, looking at the new chapters that have appeared since he left? "Grandma Virgie," came a childish voice from outside the door, and my grandson Reese, aged 8, appeared on the doorstep, the only ray of sunshine in this musty house. "Good morning, my little explorer." I hugged him, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo. "Have you had breakfast yet? Mommy said you'd cook." He nuzzled his nose into my shoulder. "Daddy had already left for work. He said you overslept again." The clock on the nightstand read 7 in the morning. Aiden knew I hadn't overslept. It was another one of his little stilettos, another reminder of my uselessness. In the kitchen, I caught my daughter hurriedly getting ready for work. Lillian, 39 years old, with her brown hair gathered in a casual bun and wearing an austere suit, looked tired even at the beginning of the day. "Mom, can you take Reese to practice at 10 o'clock? I have a meeting and you're home anyway." She didn't even look up at me, hurriedly gathering papers into her briefcase. "Sure, honey." I pulled eggs out of the fridge for Reese's omelet. "What about dinner?" "Aiden wants lasagna. You don't mind making it, do you?" She finally looked up at me with that guilty expression she got whenever she passed the buck to me. I almost laughed. "Do you mind? Who cares if I mind or not? I'm living in their house, taking advantage of their hospitality, as Aiden often reminds me, and lasagna is a small price to pay for a roof over my head." "Sure, I don't mind," I replied, smiling. "Just need to get some stuffing and cheese." Lillian left $50 on the table and kissed Reese. "Be a good boy for Grandma, and don't forget to brush your teeth before school." When the door closed behind her, it was just me and Reese. I made him an omelet with cheese and tomato, just the way he liked it, and poured myself a cup of strong black coffee. While he ate, I looked out the window at the neat houses of Middletown and thought of my own house, the one Humphrey and I had bought 45 years ago. A 2-story Victorian house with a terrace and a garden where I grew roses. Humphrey himself built the ivy-covered gazebo where I loved to read on summer evenings. The house where Lillian was born and raised. The house full of memories that I sold after my husband died. Humphrey was gone 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed too late. 6 months of agony that I spent by his side, changing bandages, giving medication, holding his hand in those moments when the pain became unbearable. I had quit my job 15 years earlier to take care of him when his first heart problems began. I never regretted that decision. Humphrey was the love of my life, my rock, my best friend. After his death, the house became too big and empty. Taxes, utilities, repairs, all of it was an overwhelming burden for a retired woman, even with my savings. When I talked about selling and finding a smaller apartment, Lillian offered to stay with them while you decide what to do next. A temporary solution. I still remember the way she said those words. "It's temporary, Mom, while you recover from your loss, while you find the right apartment." The house was sold for $450,000, a good sum that should have provided me with a comfortable old age. Aiden, who worked for a pharmaceutical company called Everest Bioscience in a management position, offered to help invest the money. At your age, Virginia, you need to think about capital preservation and steady income, he said with that condescending smile he saved for me. I know some excellent funds that give a good rate of interest. Let me take care of it. I agreed, signed some papers, and handed over the money. 2 years have passed since then. 2 years of politely evasive answers to my questions about the state of the investments. 2 years of the market is volatile right now. You have to give it time, and I've got it under control. 2 years of living in the guest room. Grandma, I'm ready. Reese's voice brought me back to reality. Can I play on the tablet before school? 20 minutes, no more. I smiled at him. And don't forget to brush your teeth like Mom said. While he played, I cleared the table and started making lasagna dough. On Thursdays, I usually bake it ahead of time so it can properly proof by the evening. Cooking always calmed me. It was a kind of meditation, precise measurements, a sequence of actions, a predictable result, something that was sorely lacking in my life right now. After dropping Reese off at school, I went shopping. The supermarket 3 blocks from home was a place where I often spent time, leisurely wandering between the aisles, talking with other retirees, exchanging recipes and news. It was the little social life I had left. Virginia. Beverly Patterson, 70 years old, my new book club acquaintance, called out to me. How are you, dear? Same old, Bev. I smiled at her. Getting ready to make lasagna for the family. Again? She shook her head. You spoil them too much. Your son-in-law should appreciate a mother-in-law like that. I just grinned. If only she knew. When I got home, I put away my shopping and checked the mail. Among the bills and flyers was a letter from my old friend and colleague Phyllis Whitby. We'd worked together in a pharmaceutical lab for almost 20 years. Phyllis had always been ambitious. Unlike me, she had pursued her career and now held an important position in some large company. In the letter, she talked about her work, her grandchildren, and asked how I was doing. It was just a friendly letter, but one phrase caught my attention. The industry has changed so much, Virgie, but something remains the same. The shortage of experienced professionals with a clinical mindset. Your expertise would still be worth its weight in gold. I set the letter aside, feeling a strange tingling in my fingers. When was the last time I'd thought about work? When was the last time I felt valuable, needed, competent? The sound of the front door opening interrupted my thoughts. The tall figure of Aiden Brookhaven, my brother-in-law, appeared in the hallway. 42 years old, a fashionable haircut with graying at the temples, expensive suit, cold gray eyes. He came home for lunch, as he sometimes did when he had free time between appointments. Ah, Virginia, he said in that peculiar tone he reserved for me, a mixture of condescension and mild irritation. I see you got the money for the shopping. Good afternoon, Aiden, I replied calmly. Yes, Lillian left it. I made the lasagna dough like you asked. Great, he tossed his briefcase on the couch and loosened his tie. What are we having for lunch? I thought you were having lunch in town, I said, confused. But I can make a quick sandwich. Don't bother. He waved his hand. I'll get something from the fridge. He went into the kitchen, took out a container of last night's leftovers, and put it in the microwave without even looking at me. I was left standing in the doorway, feeling invisible in my own. No, not my own. Their house. How was work? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. It's fine. He threw me a brief glance. Not that you get the details. I've worked in pharmaceuticals for 30 years, Aiden. I reminded him, feeling the familiar wave of irritation rising inside. I might understand more than you think. That was a long time ago, Virginia. He grinned. The industry has changed completely. What we do now at Everest would seem like science fiction to you. He spoke to me as if I were a child or an old woman out of her mind. I clenched my teeth, holding back a sharp reply. I shouldn't have started the conflict. By the way, he continued, taking the warmed food out of the microwave, I looked at the latest reports on your investments. The market is still unstable. It's been going on for 2 years now, Aiden. I tried to speak calmly. Maybe you should consider other options. Trust me, Virginia. He smiled that fake smile he used when he talked to me. I know what I'm doing. At your age, you don't have to worry about finances. Just enjoy life. Enjoy life. Like that was possible in my position. I'd at least like to see the reports, I insisted. It's my money after all. His gaze grew colder. Of course, he cut off a piece of chicken. I'll email them to you. By the way, did you remember to pick up my suit from the dry cleaners today? I need it for my presentation tomorrow. And just like that, in one sentence, he turned the conversation around, reminding me of my place in this house. I hadn't forgotten, I answered briefly. He nodded, finished his lunch, and left without putting the dishes away, tossing them over his shoulder. Don't forget to water the flowers on the terrace as well. Lillian said you forgot yesterday. When the door closed behind him, I sank slowly into the chair. The little daily humiliations, constant reminders that I'm here as a charity case, that I should be grateful for the roof over my head, for being able to see my grandson every day, for being allowed to stay. I looked at my hands, the hands that had once conducted complex laboratory research, written scientific papers, held vials of life-saving substances. Now those hands were washing dishes for Aiden, cooking food he didn't thank me for, watering flowers he wouldn't even remember if he didn't need to blame me for something. On the wall in the living room hung our family picture me, Humphrey, little Lillian. We were smiling, happy and hopeful. Humphrey was holding my hand, and there was so much love and pride in his eyes. He was always proud of my work, of my intelligence. My brilliant Virgie, he used to say, you are saving lives with your research. What would he say if he saw me now? I sighed and stood up. I had to pick up Aiden's suit from the dry cleaners, water the flowers, finish making lasagna, pick up Reese from school, help him with his homework, make dinner. A list of endless little chores that turned me from a pharmaceutical scientist into a domestic servant. It's only temporary, Lillian had said 2 years ago. But every day I realized the bitter truth more and more. Nothing is as permanent as temporary, and if I didn't make a change myself, I would remain here, in this small room, in this humiliated role, until it was my time to join the Humphreys. I looked at Phyllis's letter lying on the table. Your knowledge so far would be worth its weight in gold. Maybe it wasn't too late to make a change. The telephone bell rang the next morning when the house was empty. Lillian had gone to work, Aiden had left for some important meeting, and I had dropped Reese off at school. I was just dusting the living room, humming an old song Humphrey and I often listened to. The number was unfamiliar, and I almost decided not to answer. Usually only telemarketers called at this hour. But something made me press the answer button. Hello, Virginia Cassidy speaking. Virginia, is that you? My God, your voice hasn't changed a bit. I did not immediately recognize the speaker, but this manner of speech, fast, a little jerky, with a characteristic stretching of vowels, could belong to only one person. Phyllis? Phyllis Whitby? That's the one. There was laughter on the other end of the line. How are you, you old test tube? I laughed involuntarily. Old test tube? That's what she'd called me 30 years ago. When we worked together in the Northwest Pharmaceuticals Research Lab, Phyllis was always the daredevil among us scientists. While most of us women in science tried to keep a low profile and prove our worth solely by results, Phyllis could argue with any director if she thought he was wrong. Yeah, I'm fine, I said, sitting down on the couch. I've been staying with my daughter since Humphrey died. How are you? Did you get my letter? Yes, I did, and that's why I'm calling. But first, I'm sorry about Humphrey. I know it's been 3 years, but still, he was a good man. Thank you. I felt a familiar lump in my throat. Yeah, he was. Look, I'm calling for a reason. Phyllis's voice turned businesslike. I'm having a serious conversation with you. Can you talk now? No one's listening in? No, I'm alone at home. I straightened my back involuntarily, catching something important in her voice. What's wrong? Virgie, have you heard of Everest Bioscience? I froze, clutching the phone. Of course I have. My brother-in-law works there, some senior position in marketing and development. Oh, yeah? Phyllis sounded surprised. That's an interesting coincidence. Well, I'm on the board of directors of Everest. We're expanding, introducing new technologies, but we've had some problems. What kind of problems? I asked, feeling my long dormant professional curiosity awakening. Let's just say that our current CEO, Harlan Graves, is too conservative. He's blocking the introduction of new technologies, afraid to take risks with innovative projects. The company's losing ground in the marketplace. And what does that have to do with me? There was a short pause, and then Phyllis said, we're looking for a new CEO, and I suggested you. I laughed, loud and nervous. Is this a joke? Phyllis, I'm 73. I haven't worked in the industry in 15 years. I don't even know how to use half the modern equipment. You don't have to. Phyllis's voice became serious. We don't need someone to do the research on their own. We need a leader with a clinical mindset, with an understanding of pharmacology at a fundamental level, with experience in innovation. You have all of that. I did, I corrected. 15 years ago. Some things don't change, Virgie. Your ability to see the future, your understanding of how drugs work, your experience in clinical trials, it's all still relevant. I got up and walked over to the window, looking out at the empty street. My mind whirled with thoughts. Is this some kind of crazy prank, or was Phyllis really serious? Why would you take such a risk? I finally asked. Find someone younger, with actual experience. We've tried, Phyllis sighed. We've changed 3 directors in the last year. All of them had glittering resumes, MBAs from top universities, and experience in large companies. And they were all purely profit-oriented, not science-oriented. And Everest is first and foremost a science company. I was silent, digesting the information. The thought of returning to the profession, of being able to do what I loved again, was both exciting and terrifying. I'm not what I used to be, Phyllis, I said quietly. The years take their toll. Nonsense, she snorted. I saw your recent picture in the letter. You look great. And as for intelligence, it's only sharper at our age. And the board of directors? Would they be willing to appoint a 73-year-old woman as executive director? Actually, it wasn't just my idea, Phyllis said with a smile. After I mentioned your name, Dr. Price. Remember Lawrence Price? He's now the board's chief scientific advisor, immediately endorsed the idea. He remembers your work on antihistamines. I felt a warming in my chest. Dr. Price was one of the most respected scientists in our field. The fact that he remembered my work after all these years? Look, Virgie, Phyllis continued, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now, but I'd like to meet with you in person, discuss the details, show you the company, introduce you to the key people, give you a chance to see if it's realistic. I closed my eyes, imagining a return to the professional world, being valued, respected, needed again, making decisions, influencing the development of science, and of course to have my own income, to be able to live independently. Okay, I said, let's meet, but I promise nothing. Great, Phyllis exclaimed. How about tomorrow? I can pick you up and we'll go to the head office. Tomorrow, I wondered. Tomorrow Reese is at school until 3, and then he has soccer practice. Lillian and Aiden will be at work. Yeah, tomorrow's fine, but let's meet somewhere in town. Yeah, I don't want to tell my family yet. I understand, Phyllis said, no surprise in her voice. 10 o'clock in the morning, then, at the Blue Cup Cafe on Main Street? You know it? Yes, I do. I'll be there. After the call, I sat on the couch for a long time, trying to process what had happened. CEO of a pharmaceutical company. At 73, after 15 years out of the profession. It sounded fantastic. I got up and walked over to the bookcase, where I kept my old scientific journals and notes. I pulled out a tattered folder of my latest research. The pages were yellowed, the staples rusted, but the formulas and graphs were still clear. I flipped through the pages, sinking into the memories. I was a good scientist, maybe not a genius, but definitely above average. My work on antihistamines had led to a drug that was still in use today. I ran clinical trials, wrote scientific papers, spoke at conferences, and then Humphrey got sick. At first, it was heart problems, nothing critical, but requiring constant monitoring and care. He insisted that I keep working, but I could see how hard it was for him to be alone. When I was offered early retirement with good terms, I accepted. Humphrey was more important than his career. 15 years taking care of my husband. 15 years out of science. What do I know about modern drugs? New research methods? The current state of the market? I closed the folder and walked back into the living room. My gaze fell on the stack of scientific journals on the coffee table. The latest issues of Pharmaceutical Review and Biomedical Innovations. The journals I'd continued to subscribe to all these years, the ones I read in the evenings when Humphrey was asleep, the magazines I'd brought with me to Lillian's house, which Aiden had once called an old lady hobby. Maybe I wasn't as behind on life as I thought. A recent article about new methods of drug delivery across the blood-brain barrier came to mind. I remembered analyzing the proposed method, finding strengths and weaknesses, mentally suggesting improvements. It was, it was like the old me, the Virginia who lived science, who saw promise and possibility. The sound of the front door snapped me out of my musings. Aiden was back earlier than usual. I hurriedly put away my research folder and tried to put on a casual demeanor. Virginia? He nodded, walking into the living room. You won't believe what a day it is today. I've been promoted to Director of Marketing and Development. Congratulations. I tried to put enthusiasm in my voice. That's wonderful news. Yeah, Old Man Graves finally appreciates my ideas. Aiden paced the room, glowing with pride. The company is preparing for major changes, and I'll be at the center of it. Graves, the very name Phyllis had mentioned. The current CEO whom the board plans to replace. Manoy, tomorrow's the big day, Aiden continued. An investor presentation, then lunch with the board. I need my best suit, that dark blue one. I picked up the dry cleaning like you asked, I said. It's hanging in your dressing room. Good, he nodded without thanking me. One more thing. We're having a family dinner in honor of my promotion. Saturday. We're inviting my parents, my sister, and her husband. Can you cook something special? Sure, I nodded. What would you like? Surprise me. He waved his hand. You know our tastes. Just don't skimp. It's an important event. With those words, he retreated to his office, leaving me alone. I sank slowly onto the couch, feeling dizzy with the irony of the situation. Aiden celebrating his promotion, unaware that his mother-in-law might soon become his boss. It would be funny if it wasn't so unnerving. The next morning, I woke up early, with a sense of excitement I hadn't felt in years. I chose my outfit carefully, a dark maroon pantsuit that I'd bought before Humphrey's illness, and which, thankfully, still fit me. I styled my hair and put on a little makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw myself not as an old housewife, but as a professional, a woman with experience and knowledge. Lillian and Aiden had already left, but Reese was still eating breakfast. "Wow, Grandma, you look like a businesswoman," he exclaimed with his mouth full of cereal. "Don't talk with your mouth full, dear." I smiled, kissing the top of his head. "I'm meeting an old friend. We haven't seen each other in years." "Cool." He finished his milk and jumped up from the table. "I'm ready for school." After I dropped Reese off, I went to the Blue Cup Cafe. Phyllis was already waiting for me, elegant, trim, with a short haircut dyed platinum blonde. She always managed to look younger than her age. "Virgie," she hugged me. "My goodness, you haven't changed much." A compliment that only a very good friend can give. I laughed, hugging her back. We ordered coffee, and Phyllis got right to the point. "Here's what the board of directors is proposing." She pulled a folder out of her briefcase. A 3-year renewable contract, full benefits package, premium health insurance, stock options, salary. She showed me a number on the document, and I almost choked on my coffee. That's that's very generous," I said when I could speak. "It's the market price for your expertise." Phyllis shrugged. "Plus a premium for urgency. We need a decision by the end of the week. Graves resigned yesterday, officially for health reasons, but we all know the board forced him to." "Yesterday?" I remembered Aiden talking about Graves in the present tense, so he didn't know about the resignation yet. "And who's acting in the interim?" "Me," Phyllis grimaced. "Believe me, it's not a position I'd want to hold for long. Too much administrative work, too little science. But it might be perfect for you at this stage of life." I looked over the contract. Everything looked serious and professional, but my doubts still gnawed at me. "Phyllis, I'm not sure I can do this," I admitted. 15 years is a long time. "Let's check it out." She smiled and pulled out another folder. "Here are descriptions of the company's 3 current projects. Look through them and tell me what you think." I opened the folder and started reading. The first project concerned the development of a new anti-allergy drug based on modified antibodies. I noticed a potential problem right away. "There's a possible cross-reaction with transporter proteins here," I said, pointing to the formula. "That could lead to liver side effects." Phyllis smiled even wider. "That's exactly what I told the board. Now look at the second project." The second project involved delivering drugs across the blood-brain barrier, a topic I recently read about in a magazine. "It's an interesting approach, but they don't take into account the possibility of microthrombus formation when using this carrier." I tapped my finger thoughtfully on the page. "We need to modify the surface of nanoparticles, add anticoagulant properties." 3-0 in your favor, Phyllis nodded. "That's what stalled the project. The team has been looking for a solution for 3 months. To my surprise, I found that I understood the essence of the projects, saw the problems, and could even suggest solutions. Yes, some of the details were unfamiliar to me. The terminology sometimes seemed new, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Maybe I'm not as hopelessly out of date as I thought," I muttered. "Virgie, you were never obsolete." Phyllis covered my hand with hers. "You're just temporarily retired. But your brain, your understanding of science, your ability to see the big picture, all of that, hasn't gone anywhere." We finished our coffee, and Phyllis suggested, "Let's go to the office. I'll show you around the company, introduce you to the key people. You can get a better idea." Everest Bioscience was headquartered in a modern glass and concrete building on the outskirts of Middletown. Phyllis led me through security with a guest pass, and we took the elevator to the 20th floor. "This is where the administrative offices are," she explained as we walked down the carpeted hallway. "The research labs are in a separate building outside the city, but all the important decisions are made here." She showed me the conference rooms, the dining room, the library, and the employee gym. We met several board members, including Dr. Lawrence Price, a gray haired gentleman with shrewd eyes, who shook my hand warmly. Mrs. Cassidy, I remember your work on H1 antagonists, he said. Brilliant research. I hope we can take advantage of your talent again. Fortunately, we didn't run into Aiden. Phyllis said the marketing department was on another floor and they had a field trip scheduled that day. After the tour, Phyllis led me to a spacious office with panoramic windows. This is the executive director's office, she said. It might soon be yours. I looked around, imagining myself behind a large desk, reviewing reports, making decisions, running the company. It was it was exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Phyllis, I don't know, I said, sitting down in the leather chair. It's a huge responsibility, one that you're more than worthy of. She sat down across from me. Look, I know it's not an easy decision, but think of the possibilities: financial independence, professional recognition, a chance to contribute to science, and, she winked, a chance to shake your son-in-law up a little. I couldn't help but smile, imagining the look on Aiden's face when he learned of my appointment. Let me think about it until tomorrow, I asked. Sure, Phyllis nodded. But Virgie, don't pass up this chance out of fear. You deserve better than to be someone's housekeeper. Back home, I spent the rest of the day in deep thought. I reread the contract, studied the projects more thoroughly, even sketched out a few ideas for problem solving. And the more I thought, the clearer it became that I wanted to accept the offer. In the evening, when Lillian, Aiden, and Reese gathered for dinner, I watched them, keeping my secret. Aiden was talking about his successful presentation, about the impression he had made on the investors. Lillian nodded absently, absorbed in her own thoughts. Reese was picking at his food, wishing he could get back to his video game. They didn't even ask how my day was going. The next morning, I called Phyllis. I'm in, I said without preamble. That's great, she exclaimed. The board will be thrilled. When can you come over to sign the papers? This afternoon while everyone's at work and school. Done. And Virgie, congratulations. You won't regret this decision. At 1 p.m., I was back in the Everest office. 10 board members, including Phyllis and Dr. Price, were gathered in the conference room. They greeted me with applause. Mrs. Cassidy, began the chairman of the board, Mr. Abbott, we are pleased to welcome you to the Everest Bioscience team. Your experience and expertise is exactly what the company needs during this time of transition. I have signed a contract and we have discussed the details of formally announcing my appointment. We plan to make a public announcement on Monday, said Mr. Abbott. Until then, the information is confidential. We realize that this may create some awkwardness with your son-in-law. I can handle it, I assured him, but I'd rather he hear it from me than from the official announcement. Of course, the chairman nodded. That's your right. As I left the building with a copy of the contract in my bag, I was filled with conflicting emotions: pride in the trust they had placed in me, excitement about the new challenges, worry about how my family would react, and, needless to say, a certain vindictive satisfaction at the thought of how Aiden's attitude would change when he found out I was no longer a helpless old woman dependent on his favor. Now I was faced with the difficult task of how and when to inform my family of my new position. I decided that I would do it on Saturday at the family dinner in honor of Aiden's promotion. It seemed poetically fair to announce my appointment at a celebration of his career advancement. Until then, I decided to keep it a secret. Let it be my little secret for a couple more days. Saturday came all too quickly. I spent the entire day in the kitchen preparing a special dinner in honor of Aiden's promotion: pork medallions in wine sauce, potato gratin, arugula and pear salad, and for dessert, wild berry cheesecake. A menu worthy of a holiday, although inwardly, I was already imagining how in a few days I myself will be the center of attention at a corporate reception in my honor. The last 2 days had not been easy for me. To hide my excitement, to pretend that nothing had changed, to continue to play the role of the obliging mother-in-law. But I held on, repeating to myself that this was temporary, that very soon everything would change. Grandma, can I help you? Reese peeked into the kitchen, attracted by the aroma of baking. Sure, honey, I smiled, holding out a bowl of cookie dough to him. You can stir it in, just be careful. Why are we making so much food? Because today is a special day for your daddy. I started to arrange the cutlery on the tray. We're having guests over to celebrate his success. Is he really the big boss now? Reese stirred the dough diligently, occasionally licking the spoon. I grinned to myself. If only he knew who was about to become an even bigger boss. Yeah, he's got a big job. Bigger than the one you had? Reese asked innocently. I froze. Reese had never been interested in my past career before. Where did that question come from? What do you mean, darling? Mom said you were some kind of scientist before. He shrugged. And made medicines. Is that true? Yes. I felt a warmth in my chest at what Lillian was telling her son about me. I worked for a pharmaceutical company. We developed drugs, tested their safety, helped people get better. That's cool, Reese exclaimed, like in superhero movies. Why don't you do that anymore? I went over and hugged him, leaving a light kiss on the top of his head. Grandpa got sick and I took off work to take care of him. And now? He looked up at me seriously. Grandpa's gone. Why don't you go back on your medication? From a child's mouth, the question sounded so simple and logical. Why not? Why did I allow myself to become a domestic servant, forgetting my vocation, my knowledge, my worth? You know what, Reese? I smiled at him. Maybe I will. At 6:30, the guests began to arrive. The first to show up were Aiden's parents, Herbert and Agatha Brookhaven, a prim couple a little older than mine. They'd always treated me with cool politeness, as an inevitable but not too pleasant addition to their son's family. Virginia, Agatha nodded, handing me her coat. I hope you made something gluten-free. My gastroenterologist insists. Of course, Agatha. I smiled, accepting the coat. The potato gratin and salad are completely gluten-free, and for dessert, I've prepared a special version for you. She nodded without thanking me and walked into the living room, where Lillian was already pouring an aperitif. Hebert shook my hand, the dry, formal handshake he used for people unworthy of a hug. Aiden's sister Selma and her husband Norman arrived next, a pleasant middle-aged couple with whom I'd always found common ground. They, unlike the older Brookhaven men, were simple and cordial. Virginia. Selma put her arm around me. How are you holding up? Lillian said you were doing well. Yes, thank you. I smiled, grateful for the genuine concern. Come in, dear. Norman, whiskey or wine? When everyone was gathered in the living room, Aiden appeared in his new suit, with a smug smile of a man who had just been recognized for his achievements. Family, he spread his arms. Thank you for coming to share in my triumph. He strode across the room, accepting congratulations, pats on the back, kisses on the cheek. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, noticing the way he held himself, like a king condescending to his subjects. Mom, we're out of wine, Lillian whispered, coming toward me. Do we have any more? Yes, in the pantry, bottom shelf, I said. I'll get it. No, I'll get it. She squeezed my hand. You've done enough. Everything looks great. There was something in her eyes, gratitude, guilt, that made me wonder how comfortable she was in this situation, where her mother was practically a servant at her husband's party. I served dinner in the dining room, setting the table beautifully with Lillian's best dishes. Everyone took their seats, Aidan at the head of the table, Lillian at his right hand, and his father at his left. I sat between Reese and Selma, away from the center of attention. Before we begin, Aidan rose, holding up a glass of wine. I'd like to make a toast to Everest Bioscience, the company that finally recognized my talent and gave me the position I deserve. Everyone raised their glasses, even Reese with his glass of apple juice. And also, Aidan continued, I want to announce something that only the initiated know about. The company is preparing for a major restructuring. Graves has resigned, and the name of the new CEO will be announced on Monday. I almost choked on my wine. Does he know? Did someone tell him about my appointment? The rumor, Aidan lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, is that it will be someone from outside the company, and my job is to prepare a marketing strategy that will help the company through this transition period. It's a huge responsibility, but I can do it. I exhaled a sigh of relief. He doesn't know. He's just bragging about his importance in the upcoming changes. To Aiden, Herbert proclaimed, and everyone raised their glasses again. The dinner continued in an atmosphere of admiration for Aiden's achievements. He talked about his plans, about how he was going to reorganize the marketing department, about the new advertising campaigns he was planning to launch. I think we need to emphasize the innovation of our products, he said as he served himself a second portion of meat. Show that Everest is the future of pharmaceuticals. What about safety? I couldn't resist asking. Consumers are now very concerned about the side effects of new drugs. Aiden looked at me with mild irritation, as he usually did when I dared to interfere in a conversation about his work. Safety is important, Virginia, he said condescendingly. But that's the concern of the research department, not marketing. We're selling a lifestyle, not a list of side effects. And yet, I sipped my wine, feeling the professional excitement rising in me. A marketing strategy must take into account the real properties of a product, especially in pharmaceuticals, where reputation is so important. Mom, Lillian said quietly, giving me a warning look, but I couldn't stop now. For too long, I'd been silent, acquiescent, compliant. For example, your new antihistamine, I continued. I understand it has potential problems with liver toxicity. That should be factored into your marketing strategy. There was silence. Aiden stared at me with his mouth open. Where did you? He frowned. It's inside information. Who told you? I just assumed. I shrugged, inwardly chastising myself for being careless. Given the structure of the molecule, it's a logical concern. The structure of the molecule? Aiden laughed, but there was no mirth in his laughter. Virginia, you're talking about things you know nothing about. Your time in science passed a long time ago. The world has changed. Some fundamental principles remain the same. I cut off a piece of meat trying to look calm, and one of them is the need to consider safety when promoting medicines. Lillian put her hand on her husband's shoulder, as if warning him not to get worked up. But Aiden was already annoyed. With all due respect, Virginia, his voice grew louder and louder. You're a former lab tech who spent the last 20 years changing diapers and making dinners. Don't try to give me advice on running a modern pharmaceutical company. Aiden, Selma exclaimed, clearly shocked by her brother's rudeness. No, no, he held up his hand. I appreciate everything Virginia does for our family. She's a wonderful hostess and a caring grandmother, but there are some areas in which she is simply not competent. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. 20 years of changing diapers? Me, a PhD in pharmacology, head of a research group, author of 16 scientific articles? Aiden, Norman, Selma's husband, said softly, let's change the subject. It's a holiday today. We shouldn't. No. Aiden was already in that state when alcohol and self-righteousness make a person especially intemperate. I want to be clear. I'm grateful to Virginia for everything she's doing, but she should know her place. There are things in science and business that she just can't understand. Can't understand? I put my fork down slowly. Aiden, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 30 years. I managed clinical trials. Yeah, that was a long time ago. He interrupted me. Now you live in our home. You enjoy our hospitality. I appreciate your help with the household, with Reese, but don't try to give me professional advice. Dad, Grandma really knows about the medication. Reese interjected, sensing the conversation was getting more and more tense. She told me, Reese, grown-ups talk. Aiden dismissed it. I saw his grandson's face crinkle with resentment. That was the last straw. Aiden, I said icily, you don't talk to my grandson like that. Your grandson? He snorted. In my house? Virginia, let me get this straight. You live here on my terms. You're here to help, not to teach us how to live. In fact, you're. He paused, but I could see what he was trying to say. Basically, what am I, Aiden? I asked quietly. You're basically just a servant in this house, he blurted out, and the room fell into shocked silence. I saw Lillian turn pale, Selma cover her mouth with her hand, and Herbert fidget awkwardly in his chair. Reese stared at his father with wide-open eyes, unable to understand how Dad could say such a thing to Grandma. Something clicked inside me, like a switch flipped to a different position. 2 years of humiliation, condescension, neglect. 2 years in which I had allowed this man to devalue me, my past, my accomplishments, my knowledge. I stood up, straightened to my full height, and looked Aiden straight in the eye. You shouldn't do that, Aiden, I said calmly. Yesterday, I became the director of the company you work for, and now I didn't have time to finish. Aiden laughed, sharply, nervously. What? He shook his head. Virginia, this is ridiculous, even for you. You, the director of Everest, at 73, after a 15-year career break? Is this some kind of joke? Mom? Lillian looked at me with concern. What are you talking about? I opened my purse, which I had thoughtfully left on a nearby chair, and pulled out a copy of the contract I had signed 2 days ago. Not the director, Aiden. I placed the document on the table. Executive Director, your new boss. Aiden grabbed the contract, quickly running his eyes over the first few lines. His face began to change, from mock disbelief to shock, then to horror, and finally to a dead pallor. It's impossible, he muttered. What's in there? Lillian leaned over, trying to peer into the document. Aiden, what's going on? Your mother, he swallowed hard. Your mother has signed on as CEO of Everest Bioscience, my company. Our company, Aiden, I corrected him gently. As of Monday, our company. Lillian looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Mom, is it true? But how, when, Phyllis Whitby, I shrugged. She's a longtime colleague of mine, now on the board of directors of Everest. She nominated me, and the board unanimously approved. But why didn't you say anything? Lillian's eyes were filled with disbelief mixed with resentment. Why did you keep it from us? I had planned to tell you today. I looked around at the shocked guests. It came a little sooner than I wanted. Hebert was the first to break the silence, coughing and pushing his plate away. Well, he said with an awkward smile, congratulations, Virginia. It's unexpected, but impressive. There's some kind of mistake. Aiden still couldn't believe it, rereading the contract over and over again. Some kind of mistake or a prank. No prank. I smiled at him with the same condescension with which he usually spoke to me. You can call head office and check it out. I'm afraid there's no one there on a Saturday night, though. You'll have to wait until Monday. That's impossible, he repeated, looking at me with blank eyes. You, you don't understand anything about the modern pharmaceutical business. Maybe, I nodded, but the board of directors seems to think otherwise. They think my experience in drug research and development will give the company what it lacks, a focus on science, not just profit. Yay, Grandma! Exclaimed Reese, who seemed more amused than alarmed by the situation. You're gonna be Daddy's boss. What do you plan to do? Agatha asked, suddenly interested in the conversation. With our son? With Aiden? I shrugged. Nothing. He's a good marketing man, from what I understand. If he does his job professionally, we won't have a problem. But how could you? Lillian looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Behind our backs? Lillian, I turned to my daughter, feeling a prick of guilt. This all happened very quickly. Phyllis called a few days ago. I met with the board, they made an offer, and I accepted. I was going to tell you tonight after dinner. It's just, I glanced at Aiden. Circumstances forced me to do it sooner. But why? She insisted. Why would you go back to work at your age? You've got us. You've got the house. You've got Reese. I have a guest room and the responsibility of cooking dinners. I corrected her gently. And, as Aiden reminded us, I'm just a servant in this house. Lillian gave her husband an accusing look, but didn't say anything. I'm not going anywhere, I continued. I'll still see you, and I'll still see Reese. But I'm also going to do what I love and what I know how to do. Science, drug development, running a pharmaceutical company. I'm not going to work under my mother-in-law, Aiden said suddenly, rising from the table. It's, it's humiliating. It's your choice. I sipped my wine calmly. But before you make any hasty decisions, maybe you should think about your family, about Reese, about the mortgage. Aiden turned even paler, if that was possible. I'll find another job, he said, but there was no confidence in his voice. There are a lot of companies in the pharmaceutical industry. Of course, I nodded, although I should point out that most of the senior managers at Everest have non-competition clauses in their contracts. If you leave, you can't work for a competitor for at least a year. It was a random shot. I didn't know for sure if such a clause was in Aiden's contract, but from the way he clenched his teeth, I'd hit the mark. The tension in the room was almost palpable. Selma fidgeted nervously with her napkin. Norman studied the ceiling. Herbert tapped his fingers awkwardly on the table. Lillian looked at me and Aiden, as if she didn't know who to support in this situation. I suggest we continue with dinner, I said finally, returning to my seat. Dessert isn't served yet. I'm not hungry. Aiden threw his napkin on the table and left the room. The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence, interrupted only by Selma's and Norman's attempts at conversation. Lillian hardly touched her dessert, glancing toward the study where Aiden had gone. Aiden's parents left right after dessert, muttering awkward congratulations. Selma lingered to help me clear the table. You know, she said when we were alone in the kitchen, I've always thought Aiden was a little overconfident. Maybe this shakeup will do him some good. I didn't mean to make a scene, I admitted, rinsing my plate. It's just 2 years, Selma. 2 years I've put up with his condescension, his neglect. And today, when he called me a servant in front of all of you, in front of Reese, you don't have to justify yourself. She squeezed my shoulder. You deserve respect and recognition. And if this job gives you that, I'm happy for you. When all the guests had gone, Lillian put Reese to bed and came to me in the living room. Mom, she sat down across from me with her hands folded in her lap. Why didn't you talk to me about this? Why did you keep it a secret? Would you have supported me? I asked her directly. Or would you have discouraged me, told me that I was too old, that I didn't need this headache, that I should enjoy my retirement? Lillian was silent for a moment, then sighed. You're right. That's probably what I would have said. And I would have been wrong. I didn't want to cause trouble in your family. I took her hand, but I couldn't let this chance go. A chance to be me again, not just someone's mother, mother-in-law, grandmother. I understand. She nodded. I really do. It's just, Aiden. He's very proud. This is a big blow to him. He'll be fine, I said with a confidence I didn't really feel. If he's a professional, he can work with me. And if he's not, maybe that would be a useful lesson too. Lillian stood up, getting ready to leave. I hope you're right, Mom, she said quietly. I hope all this doesn't destroy our family. I was alone in the living room, pondering the implications of tonight. I hadn't planned on revealing my new situation so dramatically, but maybe it was even better this way, like ripping off a Band-Aid, quick and painful, but effective. Monday would come in 2 days, and then a new chapter of my life will begin, a chapter in which I will no longer be just a servant in this house. I will be a leader, a scholar, a person whose opinion carries weight, a man who deserves respect. But first, I need to survive the weekend in the company of Aiden, who will surely avoid me at all costs. Monday came with the inevitability of sunrise. It was as if the entire house had fallen silent, filled with an oppressive silence. Aiden spent the rest of the weekend locked in his office, coming out only to get food, which he silently took away and brought back. Lillian was torn between us, trying to maintain at least a semblance of normal family life. Only Reese, with childlike directness, seemed unaffected by the tension. He was thrilled at the thought that his grandmother was now super boss. I woke up at 5 in the morning, even though I didn't have to be in the office until 9. Sleep wouldn't come. Too many thoughts, too much excitement. My first day at work in 15 years. My first day as not just a scientist, but as the head of a large company. After taking a shower, I took a long time to choose what to wear. In the end, I decided on a strict dark blue suit with a skirt just below my knees and a white blouse. It was a classic choice, but I felt confident in it. I tucked my hair into a neat style and applied light makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw not just an older woman, but a seasoned professional. When I went down to the kitchen, Lillian was already there, preparing breakfast. Good morning, Mom. She gave me a quick glance. You're early. I'm nervous, I admitted honestly. Today's a big day. She nodded, cracking eggs into the pan. Aiden had already left, said he had an early meeting. I wasn't surprised. It was obvious he would do anything to avoid traveling to work together. I understand. I sat down at the table, pouring myself a cup of coffee. Lillian, I want you to know that I'm not going to do anything to hurt Aiden's career. If he does his job professionally, we won't have a problem. She turned toward me, and I could see the shadows under her eyes. It looked like she hadn't slept well either. He thinks you did it on purpose, that you deliberately got into his company to humiliate him? I sighed. Of course, Aiden sees everything through the prism of his ego. He doesn't. I didn't even know the offer was coming from Everest until Phyllis called. It was a coincidence. But you could have said no, Lillian said, putting scrambled eggs on plates. When you found out it was Aiden's company. I could have, I agreed. But why would I do that? Give up the chance to return to the profession I loved? The financial independence? The chance to feel valued and respected again? At 8:30, a sleepy Reese showed up. Grandma, are you super boss today? He asked, sitting down at the table. Yes, honey, I smiled, moving a plate of toast over to him. Today is my first day. Cool. He took a big bite. Are you going to boss Daddy around? Not exactly. I threw an apologetic look at Lillian. I'll be in charge of the company, and your dad will be in charge of his department. We'll work together, but in different ways. Lillian volunteered to drive me to the office, despite my assurances that I could call a cab. It's your first day, Mom, she said as she got behind the wheel. At least let me do that. Phyllis was waiting for me in the lobby, elegant and collected, with that special aura of confidence that always surrounded her. Virgie, she gave me a hug. Ready for the first day? As ready as I can be. I nervously adjusted the collar of my blouse. Don't worry, she winked at me. Half of CEOs have no idea what they're doing when they start. At least you know the science. We took the elevator to the 20th floor, where the senior management offices were located. Phyllis led me into a spacious office with panoramic windows and a view of the city. This is your new workplace. She circled the room. The secretary, Marilyn, is waiting outside the door. There's a general meeting at 10, where you'll be introduced to all the department heads. At 11:30, a meeting with the science department. At 1 o'clock, lunch with the board of directors. I nodded, trying to memorize the schedule. What about Aiden? Would he be at the general meeting? As the marketing director, yes, he should be. Phyllis looked at me carefully. Are you okay? That's putting it mildly, I grinned. But I'll be fine. We're both adults. Left alone, I looked around the office. A huge dark wood desk, an ergonomic leather armchair, cabinets with scientific literature, a comfortable meeting area with a sofa and armchairs. Everything radiated power and solidity. I went to the window, looking out at Middletown below. From this height, it seemed toy-like, the people tiny figures. 3 days ago, I was one of them, an old woman who had lost her identity. And today I'm here, at the top of a skyscraper, ready to run a pharmaceutical company. The conference room was already filled with people, about 20 men and women in business suits, talking softly among themselves. When I entered, the conversations died down, and all eyes turned to me. Mr. Abbott, the chairman of the board of directors, approached me with a broad smile. Dr. Cassidy, welcome. He shook my hand and turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to the new executive director of Everest Bioscience, Dr. Virginia Cassidy. There was polite applause. I looked around at the faces of those present, some smiling, some looking curious, some with barely concealed skepticism. In the far corner of the room, I spotted Aiden, sitting stone-faced, avoiding looking in my direction. Thank you, Mr. Abbott. I nodded to the chairman and turned to the crowd. Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to join the Everest team, and I hope that my experience in pharmacology research will help the company reach new heights. I paused, looking around the audience. Some of you may be surprised by my appointment. I understand that. I'm not a typical candidate for the role of CEO. I'm 73 years old, and I haven't worked in the industry for the past 15 years. But I have 30 years of experience in pharmaceutical research. I've led the development of drugs that are still helping millions of patients today. And I firmly believe that our company must return to its roots, to science, to innovation. After my brief remarks, Mr. Abbott introduced me to each of the department heads. They took turns coming up, shaking my hand, and briefly talking about their areas of responsibility. When it was Aiden's turn, he rose from his seat and approached me with a strained smile. Dr. Cassidy, he said in a formal tone, extending his hand. Aiden Brookhaven, Director of Marketing and Development. Mr. Brookhaven. I shook his hand, keeping a professional distance. I've heard a lot about your achievements in marketing strategies. I'd be happy to discuss your current projects in the near future. His handshake was cold and lifeless, his eyes avoiding my gaze. As soon as the formalities were completed, he immediately withdrew, returning to his seat. The rest of the meeting was spent discussing the company's current projects, financials, and plans for the coming quarter. I listened attentively, took notes, and occasionally asked questions, demonstrating that, despite my long career break, I was quickly up to speed. I was about to leave when there was a knock on my office door. To my surprise, it was Aiden. May I come in? He asked in a formal tone. Of course, I gestured for him to sit down. What can I do for you? He remained standing, holding the back of the chair. I wanted to clarify our work situation, he said, looking over my head, how we would interact in the office. As professionals, I replied calmly. During office hours, I'm the CEO. You're the marketing manager. Our personal relationships shouldn't affect our work. I understand, he nodded. And I want to assure you that despite my personal circumstances, I will perform my duties to the highest standards. I don't doubt that, I met his gaze. I've seen your results. You're a good marketer, Aiden, and I'm not going to interfere with your department unnecessarily. It was as if he hadn't expected such direct praise, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. Thank you, he said after a pause. It's valuable to me. I got home around 6 in the evening, hailing a cab. When I entered the house, there were voices coming from the kitchen. Lillian and Aiden were arguing about something in muffled voices. I slowed my step, unwillingly listening. Did it on purpose, Lil, Aiden said. It can't be a coincidence. She joined the company on purpose, to humiliate me, to get back at me for treating her badly. Aiden, that's ridiculous. Lillian's voice sounded tired. Mom wouldn't take a job that important just to get revenge. She's a professional, and if she was offered the job, she deserves it. You don't understand, he insisted. She's always disliked me, always thought I wasn't good enough for you, and now she's found a way to control me. That's not true, Lillian countered. She's always supported our marriage, and besides, you haven't always been tactful with her yourself. What do you mean? Aiden's voice sounded threatening. You know, Lillian sighed, the way you spoke to her on Saturday. A servant in this house? Really, Aiden? I decided I'd heard enough and deliberately shut the front door loudly. I'm home, I announced as I entered the hallway. The conversation in the kitchen stopped instantly. A few seconds later, Lillian appeared with a strained smile. Mom, how was your first day? Great. I smiled as I took off my coat. Lots of information, lots of new people, but I got through it. Aiden came out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand. Virginia, he nodded without looking me in the eye. Aiden, I returned the same nod. Thank you for visiting my office today. It was professional of you. We walked to the kitchen where Lillian began to prepare dinner. Lillian, I decided to return to the conversation I had started this morning. About the money from the sale of the house. She froze, her knife in the air. Mom, now is not a good time. When will it be a better time? I asked gently. It's been 2 years and I haven't seen a single report or profit. I'm not blaming you, but I need to know what's going on with my money. Lillian put the knife aside and turned to me. I really don't know all the details, she said quietly. Aiden says the investment is long-term, that it takes time. $450,000, Lillian. I said the amount clearly. That's not chump change. It's money your father and I have been saving all our lives. Money from the house you grew up in. I know. She lowered her eyes. I'll talk to Aiden. I promise. Thank you. I nodded. Now that I had a job and a steady income, I wanted to find a place of my own. A small apartment, somewhere close to you and the office. Lillian looked up, and I saw a mixture of relief and concern in her gaze. You want to move out? Because of Aiden? Not just because of him, I shook my head. I want my independence, my space. At that moment, the door to the kitchen opened and Aiden walked in. What's the tense situation with Aiden? He asked sharply. What are you two whispering about? We're not whispering, I replied calmly. I told Lillian I wanted to get my own apartment. That's a great idea. He crossed his arms over his chest. It's about time. It had been a month since I'd been named CEO of Everest Bioscience. a month that had brought dramatic changes to both my professional and personal life. Every day I discovered something new about the company, about the modern pharmaceutical industry, about my strengths and opportunities. Things at work were even better than I expected. After initial skepticism, most of the department heads accepted me as a competent leader. My proposals to reorganize the research process were supported by the board of directors. I initiated a review of several promising projects that had been frozen under graves as too risky and proposed a new approach to clinical trials. But things were only getting worse at home. The atmosphere became so tense that sometimes the air seemed to ring with unspoken grievances and resentments. Aiden and I maintained a coldly polite neutrality at work, but at home, even that fragile truce was crumbling. Lillian was caught between two fires. I could see how hard it was for her to be torn between loyalty to her husband and love for me. She tried to be fair, but Aiden gave her no choice. He demanded unconditional support. "I don't understand why you're always on her side." I heard his voice from my daughter's bedroom late Friday night. I was about to walk past, but the next words made me slow my step. "She's doing everything she can to undermine my authority in the company," Aiden continued. "Yesterday, she rejected my marketing strategy for a new drug in a meeting in front of all my employees. Maybe she had objective reasons." Lillian's voice sounded tired. "What reasons?" Aiden snorted. "She's a pharmacologist, not a marketer. What does she understand about promoting a product?" "No, it's a personal vendetta. She's getting back at me for allegedly mistreating her." "Aiden, come on," Lillian sighed. "Mom wouldn't risk the company's reputation for revenge." "You're blind," he said, irritation in his voice. "She's manipulating you like everyone else. She's playing the role of a professional, but all she thinks about is humiliating me, and you seem to be totally on her side." "I'm not on anyone's side," Lillian exclaimed. "I just want you both to act like adults." "You mean I'm the one acting like a child?" Aiden's voice turned cold. "Fine, then you're really on her side." Footsteps sounded, and I hurried to hide in my room before Aiden came out into the hallway. Hearing him try to turn my daughter against me was painful. But it hurt even more to see Lillian suffer as she tried to keep the peace in the family. In the morning, at breakfast, Lillian looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. "Are you all right, darling?" I asked, pouring her coffee. "Yeah, I just didn't sleep well." She smiled weakly, but didn't meet my gaze. Aiden joined us, dressed for golf. He usually played with his friends on Saturdays. "Good morning." He threw in a generic greeting without looking at me. "Dad, you promised to go to the science fair with me today," Reese reminded me, looking up from his bowl of cereal. "Oh," Aiden stammered. "Sorry, buddy, but I've got an important meeting with my partners. We're going to talk big business while we play golf." Reese's face stretched in disappointment. "But you promised—" "Some other time, okay?" Aiden rubbed his head, avoiding looking into his son's eyes. "I can go with you," I offered, seeing how upset my grandson was. "I don't have plans today." "You don't?" Reese's face brightened. "Oh, great! There will be an exhibition about the medicines of the future. You'll explain everything to me." "I'd love to," I smiled, happy to be able to spend time with my grandson. Aiden gave me a disgruntled look. He couldn't object to my suggestion without looking even more selfish in his son's eyes, but he was clearly unhappy that I'd saved the day. After Aiden left and we returned from the exhibit, which, it had to be said, had been quite educational, even for me, I found Lillian at the kitchen table, studying some papers with a concerned look. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting down next to her. She flinched and tried to put the papers away, but I could see the bank logo. "Nothing, just bills," she said with a strained smile. "Lillian," I took her hand. I know you're trying to protect everyone, but maybe you need some support yourself. You can talk to me. She looked at me for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind, then sighed. We're having financial problems, she admitted quietly. Aiden insisted on buying a new car on credit, and the golf membership costs more than we can afford. I've tried to talk to him, but he won't listen, I finished for her. She nodded, and I could see the tears in her eyes. Mom, I know I should have told you sooner, but at that moment the front door swung open and we heard Aiden's voice, returning from golf earlier than usual. Lillian hastily wiped her eyes and hid her papers. Not a word to him, please, she whispered. Aiden entered the kitchen with a disgruntled look. Great day, he said sarcastically. Got caught in the rain on the 12th hole. Frederick also told me that his wife had bought stock in Everest, on my mother-in-law's advice. He gave me an accusing look. I didn't advise anyone to buy stock, I replied calmly. It would have been unethical of me. But you mentioned at the last meeting that the company was preparing for growth, he retorted, and the next day the stock jumped 5%. I went public about our plans to expand our research department. I shrugged. It's part of my job to inform the market about the company's strategy. And your strategy obviously includes undermining all of my initiatives. His voice grew louder. Aiden. Lillian put her hand on his shoulder warningly. Let's not get started. Why not? He shook off her hand. Why do we always have to tiptoe around your mother? Why can't we openly discuss what she's doing to my career? I'm not doing anything to your career. I tried to remain calm. I evaluate all projects and proposals solely from a professional point of view. Oh, really? Aiden grinned. And rejecting my marketing strategy for NeuroStem is also a professional judgment? A strategy that Graves himself approved? Graves wasn't a pharmacologist, I replied. He didn't see a problem with your approach. I do. NeuroStem is a drug with serious potential side effects. It can't be promoted as safe for everyday use. That's not for you to decide, Aiden exploded. Marketing is my area, not yours. And patient safety is the responsibility of the entire company. I raised my voice, including the marketing department. That's enough, Lillian shouted. Please stop. I can't take it anymore. We both fell silent, staring at her. Lillian rarely raised her voice, and it was shocking to see her like this. I'm tired of being between you, she continued more quietly. Every day it's the same thing. Work, money, who's right, who's wrong. I feel like I'm going crazy. Lillian, Aiden began in a softer tone, I know it's hard for you, but understand that your mother is destroying everything I've spent years building. That's not true, I interjected. I'm just doing my job. And if you were really thinking about the good of the company, not just your ego. See? Aiden turned to Lillian. She thinks I'm selfish. The man who took her in when she had nowhere else to go. The man who took care of her finances. Took care of my finances? I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. You mean the money from the sale of my house? The money I still haven't seen? Mom, Lillian began warningly. No, Lillian, I shook my head. Enough avoiding the subject. $450,000. The money your father and I have been saving all our lives. Where is it, Aiden? There was a heavy silence. Aiden turned pale, his jaw tense. It's hard to explain, he said at last. The market can be unpredictable. What does that mean? I asked demandingly. Did you lose my money? I didn't lose it, he raised his voice. I invested it in promising startups. Some of them didn't live up to expectations. Some. I looked him straight in the eye. Or all of them? Aiden? Lillian's voice shook. What is she talking about? He ran his hand over his face, suddenly looking less confident than usual. Okay, he exhaled. I invested in a few high-risk projects. They seemed promising. A biotech startup with a new gene therapy technology, a company developing revolutionary medical software. E. He hesitated. E. Lillian looked at her husband tensely. And cryptocurrencies, he added, almost in a whisper. Everyone said it was the future, that the prices were only going up. Jesus. Lillian covered her face with her hands. You invested Mom's money in cryptocurrencies? Without her consent? I was going to give it all back. Aiden defended himself. At a profit. If it hadn't been for that market crash last year. You lost everything? I felt the blood rush from my face. All my savings, all my funds for my old age, gone? Aiden lowered his gaze. Not all of it. About 70%. $315,000. I said the amount out loud, feeling each number like a hammer hitting me over the head. You lost $315,000 of my money. I was planning to make up the loss, he exclaimed. I had other investments that were going to pay off. And then I always thought that the money belonged partly to Lillian as your daughter and heiress. So you thought you had a right to control my inheritance? Lillian's voice rang with rage. Without my knowledge? I did it for us, for our family. Aiden began to raise his voice. I wanted to secure our future, to create capital for Reese. And instead, you deceived my mother and lost almost everything she had. Lillian looked at her husband as if she was seeing him for the first time. How could you, Aiden? I was going to get it all back, he repeated, but without the same confidence. In time. In time. I grinned bitterly. I'm 73, Aiden. How much of that time do I have left? He didn't answer, avoiding my eyes. Where's the rest of the money? I asked after a heavy pause. The 30% you haven't lost? In an investment account, he answered quietly. I can transfer it to you. Do that, I nodded. Today. Lillian looked devastated. I can't believe you kept this from me all this time, she said to her husband, that you lied to both of us. I wasn't lying, Aiden objected. I didn't tell the whole truth. I was afraid you'd be upset. Upset? Lillian repeated. You cheated my mother, lost her money, and then spent 2 years screwing with us about long-term investments. I'm not upset, Aiden. I'm furious. She turned to me. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I had no idea what he did with your money. I believe you, darling. I took her hand. I never thought you could have been part of this deception. It's not a hoax, Aiden said indignantly. It was an investment strategy that didn't work out. These things happen. With your own money, maybe, I cut him off, but not with other people's money, entrusted to you for safekeeping. It's called breach of trust. I got up from the table. I was tired of this conversation. Aiden, I expect the funds to be transferred by the end of the day. Now, if you'll excuse me. I went to my room, feeling my hands shaking with anger and frustration. $315,000. Gone. Vaporized because of Aiden's arrogance and incompetence. Money that was supposed to provide me with a comfortable old age, a chance to live independently. Fortunately, I had a job now. My executive director's salary was more than generous, and last week the board had approved my crisis plan for the company, rewarding me with an extraordinary bonus. I could afford a fresh start, but the pain of betrayal and loss didn't make it any less painful. Toward evening, there was a quiet knock on the door of my room. It was Lillian, her eyes reddened with tears. May I come in? She asked. I nodded, making room beside me on the bed. He transferred the money, Lillian said, holding out an envelope to me. $135,000. And also, this. She pulled out another piece of paper, a handwritten commitment, signed by Aiden, to pay me the rest of the money in monthly installments over 5 years. He wanted to pay it all at once, but we don't have that kind of money, Lillian explained. We're up to our eyeballs in loans, a car, a mortgage, club memberships. I didn't realize how bad it was. I'm sorry, honey. I put my arm around her shoulders. Not just for the money, but for putting you in this situation. What are you going to do now? She asked quietly. I took a deep breath. I had already started to take action. Remember Barbara, the real estate agent we met at the Christmas party? I contacted her last week. She found me a small apartment near the office, a 2-bedroom overlooking the park. I signed the lease yesterday. Lillian looked both surprised and sad. You've already decided? Without even telling me? I was going to tell you today. I took her hand. But then this conversation happened. Anyway, I think it's the best decision for everyone. You and Aiden need space to work out your problems without me around. And I need a place of my own where I can live independently. When are you moving? I could hear the pain in her voice. Next Saturday, I answered. The apartment is fully furnished, so I won't have to buy a lot of stuff. Just personal belongings. We sat in silence for a while. Then Lillian asked, Do you think we can manage? With Aiden, with the money, with all of this? I looked at my daughter carefully. There was anxiety and uncertainty in her eyes. She looked so young, so vulnerable. I don't know, dear, I answered honestly. It's up to both of you, but no matter what happens, I'll always be there for you. Not in this house, but in your life, and in Reese's life. I'm so disappointed in him, Lillian whispered. I can't believe he would do such a thing. People do terrible things sometimes, I sighed, especially when they're driven by pride and fear of being a loser. We talked late into the night about the future, about the past, about how things had changed in the last month, about how Lillian felt her marriage was falling apart even before my appointment, but didn't want to admit it even to herself. And the following week, I started packing my bags. It turned out that in the 2 years I'd lived in my daughter's house, I'd accumulated surprisingly little, a few boxes of books, clothes, photographs, personal items. All my possessions fit into the trunk of the cab that came to pick me up on Saturday morning. The goodbye was emotional. Reese cried, even though I explained to him over and over again that I would be living very close by, that he could come and visit me whenever he wanted, that nothing would change in our relationship. But I'm used to you always being here, Grandma, he sobbed. I'll always be with you. I hugged him tightly. It's just that now we'll have 2 homes where we can spend time together. Lillian held firm, but I could see tears in her eyes as she helped me with the last of the bags. Call every day, she said, and come over for dinner whenever you want. I will. I hugged her. Take care of yourself, darling, and remember, no matter what happens, I love you. Aiden watched me leave from the porch, silent. When I went to say goodbye, he nodded discreetly. Good luck in your new place. Thank you, I nodded back. I hope you can work out your problems. We'll manage, he said with a confidence that I suspected was more for Lillian than a reflection of reality. I got into the cab, and as I stared at the house where the last 2 years of my life had been spent, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. There was the unknown ahead, but also freedom, independence, and new opportunities. My apartment turned out to be exactly as I had hoped. Bright, spacious, with large windows and a view of the city park. The furniture was simple but comfortable. The kitchen was small but functional. Everything I needed for a single woman starting a new stage of life. After unpacking and arranging the books on the shelves, I sat in a chair by the window, watching the sun slowly slip toward sunset, coloring the sky with golden and pink tones. For the first time in years, I was truly alone, not alone, but alone with myself and my thoughts. And strangely, the thought didn't scare me. It felt right, timely, almost liberating. 6 months flew by like a day. The morning sun flooded my apartment with soft light. I sat at the window with a cup of coffee, watching the awakening park. Spring was coming. The trees were turning tender green. The first flowers were blooming in the flower beds. My life had changed beyond recognition. 6 months ago, I was an elderly widow living in the guest room of my daughter's house as a free housekeeper. Now I'm the CEO of a successful pharmaceutical company with my own apartment and financial independence. A phone call interrupted my musings. It was Lillian. Good morning, Mom. Are we still meeting for lunch? Of course, dear. 1 o'clock, Olive Grove. As agreed. Oh, great. Reese says hi. He can't wait for the weekend to come and see you. I smiled. My grandson spent every other weekend at my house, and those days became special. We went to museums, watched popular science movies, and did simple experiments in my kitchen. I had a busy day waiting for me at the office, meetings, a video conference with European partners, and an interview for an industry magazine. Over the months, I had gotten fully up to speed and now felt comfortable in my role as a manager. My strategy of returning to the company's scientific roots was beginning to bear fruit. New drugs were being tested, the stock was rising, and a trade magazine named Everest one of the most innovative pharmaceutical companies. But not everything went smoothly in the first few months. The most difficult challenge was conflict with Aiden, who, after exposing his financial fraud at home, became aggressive at work as well. He started sabotaging my initiatives, delaying reports, providing inaccurate information, turning other managers against me. The situation reached a critical point when I discovered that he had misrepresented the results of a marketing study to advance his strategy for a potentially dangerous drug. After a serious conversation in which I confronted him with the choice of working honestly or quitting, Aiden tendered his resignation. The official version was that he had decided to seek new opportunities for professional growth. But within the company, many people knew the real reason. For Lillian, it was a hard blow. She was already struggling with the consequences of her husband's financial deception, and now this. But when I told her about the falsified data, she didn't stand up for him. I no longer know who the man I married has become, she said at the time. 2 weeks later, she discovered that Aiden had secretly taken out another loan in her name using a forged signature. That was the final straw. The next day, she consulted with a divorce lawyer. At 1 p.m., I met Lillian at Olive Grove, a cozy Mediterranean restaurant not far from the office. My daughter had changed over the months. She looked older and younger at the same time. There was depth in her gaze, but a heavy weight had fallen from her shoulders. She cut her hair, changed the way she dressed, started practicing yoga. And she'd gone back to work, first part-time and now full-time at the architecture firm where she'd started her career before Reese was born. You're glowing, I said, sitting down across from her. New project? Yes, she smiled. I've been appointed lead architect for the new community center. It's going to be an eco-friendly building with green technology, exactly what I've always wanted to do. I'm so proud of you. I squeezed her hand. You deserve this chance. The conversation turned to more personal topics. The divorce hearing is next week, Lillian said. Aiden finally agreed to the terms. That's good news. I knew how long the negotiations had been going on. Aiden had resisted, tried to manipulate, threatened, but gave in when Lillian threatened to report his financial fraud to the police. Yes, she sighed. I'm relieved and a little sad. 10 years of marriage after all. That's normal, I smiled softly. The end of something is always sad, even if it wasn't healthy. Reese is doing better than I expected, Lillian continued. I think your conversations with him are helping a lot. He says you explain things in a way that makes them make sense. Our relationship has changed over the months, too. Before, I was always first and foremost a mother to Lillian, someone to support and guide. Now we were closer to equals, two grown women, each with her own life, but bound by deep love and respect. We no longer avoided difficult topics, nor did we try to smooth over sharp edges. If disagreements arose, we discussed them openly. It was refreshing and healing for both of us. When I returned home that evening, I found a package at my door. Inside was a book, a popular science publication on modern advances in pharmacology, and a note from Reese. To Grandma the scientist from my grandson, love you. I smiled, feeling warmth in my chest. Despite the challenges, my relationship with my grandson had only grown stronger. He often called me to tell me about school projects or ask for advice. And when he visited me, we had wonderful weekends full of discovery and fun. As I settled into a chair with a cup of tea, I reflected on the life twists and turns that had brought me here. Until a year ago, I could not have imagined myself in this apartment, in this position, in this new capacity. I was buried under the weight of age, loss, dependence on others. What changed? When did that turning point happen? Maybe it was Phyllis calling with a job offer. Or maybe it was Aiden's insult calling me a servant in my own home. Or maybe it was the gradual realization that I'd allowed myself to disappear, to become a shadow, an appendage to other people's lives. I remembered our home with Humphrey, our life of respect and shared interests. We were equal partners, always supporting each other. With his death, it was as if I had lost not only my husband, but also a part of myself, the confident woman I had been around him. Moving in with Lillian and Aiden was supposed to be a temporary solution, but it turned into a permanent state of dependency. I'd allowed myself to become invisible, accepting Aiden's increasingly demeaning treatment. But somewhere deep inside, that real Virginia, the scientist, the professional, the woman with her own opinions, never disappeared. She waited for the moment when she could reassert herself. And when that moment came, I found the strength to step out of the shadows, to remind everyone, and above all myself, who I really was.